We spend so much time worrying about the big things, the entire overhauls, the lifestyle changes from a bigger perspective than we need to. When it comes down to it, it's the tiny little things that we do every single day that are actually going to have the biggest impact on our lives. So that's what we're diving into today. Now, this is a concept that I kind of refer to as master of routine. This is something, just transparently, I've been working on with myself. I save it in my notes, my reminders, pops up every single morning just to remind myself this is something that I am currently working on. This is something that I'm currently working through, and I know a lot of you can relate to it. So today's episode is going to be a little bit of a different style. It's going to be less statements of fact. It's going to be less, giving you specific actionable steps, but it's going to give you more to relate to. This is going to be more of a roundtable, almost like a therapy session for the three of us that I hope you can all pick and choose from. We're going to talk about things we've done very well, some things we're struggling with, some things that have pulled us out of ruts in the past, and just see where this conversation flows organically. The girls wanted a template to go through. I told them this is all coming right off the top of our heads, so we're going to roll with it. And I hope you guys enjoy this one. So,
but if you don't and you hate it, blame Josh. Because he made
tag me, give me the hate mail. That's fine. Keep all the love for these.
We tried to come in with bullet points, and Josh said, "Nope, just let the heart flow today."
Let the heart flow today. We got to go organic. We got to let the universe speak through us on this one. That's another one I like. What's the book? The Book of Secrets. The Book of Secrets, is that what it's called? By Deepak Chopra. That's the one I'm on now, which I'm loving. I'm loving it. I'll secrets? Talk. I can't tell you. It's a secret. Go read it.
Brant just gave me a book that's like time management for dummies or something. Like, thanks.
So instead of that one, this is the one I'm going to be referring to more today, Joelle, and I'll send you a copy. The last 3 episodes, I think I've referred to this book, the 7 habits of highly successful people. And it really is essentially time management. It's basically putting your efforts in the right areas. And we talked about it again last week, but we spend so much time in this reactionary state. Put this fire out, put that fire out, especially as business owners, but obviously as busy humans, as parents, it's just a natural part of things. When the things we get the highest ROI and that put out those fires long-term are the proactive things that we're doing. So getting ahead of it all, what can we plant now as far as seeds that are going to reap the highest rewards later? Within the book, they refer to those as quadrant 2 activities. So again, last episode, if you guys didn't hear, run back to dive into those. We did touch on those, but this has been something I have been struggling with recently. And this is kind of the motivation, inspiration for this episode. Maybe this is for me. I know a lot of the podcast themes are like, hey, let me leave myself some notes, for the future as we kind of go back and listen to how far we come and, what we did to get through things. Like creating content is a lot of times reminders for yourselves. But basically, obviously, again, as parents, as business owners, there are a lot of fires to put out, and it is so easy to deprioritize certain things that you already know this will have the biggest impact. There are certain projects in our business, like I need to get to this thing. It's been 3 weeks, but we have so many little things going on with the merge, like it's in slow motion. As a human, juggling our kids and businesses and understanding what do I need to do to take care of myself so I have more to give to you guys, so I have more to give to my kids. It's a constant struggle. It's a constant juggle. And one of my downfalls is I set everything in my iPhone. I've got the reminders app that I use religiously. And it is the same, not the same 10 things, but it usually starts with 10 things for the day. And then whatever got pushed stacks onto the next day or scattered throughout the week. And then there is this overwhelming list that you're not going to get to, and you're going to keep ping-ponging it to different areas and different dates, and it never gets done. So one of the biggest things that I've been putting off, knowing it is going to be such a big impact from that book, is this exercise of basically your weekly planning. And it basically comes down to you outlining roles that you have within your life. So for example, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a business owner, and a subtopic from there, marketing certain things. So you assign, maybe it's 2 or 3 tasks you need to be doing in those things for the week. Say you do it on Sunday night. These are the things I need to do. Now, where it differentiates from that reminders app is you're actually putting blocks in your schedule. I am going to do this on this date. I don't know if our calendars are synced or not yet, but Friday night, we are going to have our date night planned. We say we're going to do it. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
This is news to Alessandra.
This is news to Alessandra. Yeah, just like how much that
Surprise.
squat, just like the squat rack. This is a little bit nicer of a surprise than the $1,000 squat rack for our 5-year-old.
Oh,
It was
for
not-
Kai, yeah.
It was not $1,000, but yeah. Anyway.
But anyway, we've talked about prioritizing, your workouts like a doctor's appointment. This is the same concept.
Yeah.
You plug it in and then it's there. You're not moving it. It's at this time. You've already negotiated that this is the time that it fits. I'm not moving these things around. So just you utilizing planning from a 30,000 foot overview rather than being in the trenches in the moment where you just keep, nope, didn't get to this today, didn't get to this today, didn't get to this today. So even little things like reminders to text my siblings. One of those things on there as a brother is just to be, reach out more often, to be, not caring isn't the word, but to step up and to be there. So I have a note or a reminder on this time, on this date. I'm going to send them a quick text. How are you? Check in. What do you need? I'd love to see you this weekend. Prioritizing time with our parents. So actually blocking these out, because when you just say I need to do these things, they get kicked to the back burner all the time. So just a quick overview of some things. Main theme of today's podcast. I've been rambling for a few minutes, so I want you guys to jump in a little bit.
Joelle, did you want to talk or do you want me to go first?
Do you have something that you want to come right to?
I was going to say, I like the whole idea of scheduling things. And I think that's advice I'm sure over the years we've all given to clients who struggle with obviously getting their workouts in and being consistent with going to the gym. You have to schedule it like you would a doctor's appointment or a business meeting, because it's really easy to just kind of let it fall off and just forget about it, or something else comes up. But when we schedule these things as an actual appointment and as an actual task at a certain time, and we're specific about it, you hold yourself to that higher standard. So I was just going to say, I really love that aspect of planning. I think that's something I personally don't do right now that I will probably steal and try to do. I'm really big. I use Notion for, I don't know if anybody listening is familiar with it, but it's basically like a fancier version of your notes app. But you can buy like templates. Like I bought a cute little template off Etsy that came done for me that I could just it has a little calendar section. It has like a to-do list. It has like a spot to put a quote for the week, or, there's different aspects to it. And then you can create pages within it, which we use for like content and like lists and things like that. But I have really loved, like on Sundays, if I can, or Monday mornings, planning out my week with Notion as far as like what my work tasks look like, what everything looks like. And I look at my calendar, Google Calendar every week, and kind of, combine the two. But I do like the idea of taking even something as simple as sending a text to someone and like scheduling it, because if you're a parent, it's just so hard to keep up with friends and family and just all the little things that we say, oh, we'll get to it. And then it's like a year later and you never get to it. So I just wanted to touch on that side of things.
I'll add another thing to the scheduling component. Obviously, the three of us have been in what I would consider a stressful season of life, amongst lots of incredible changes, but still stressful changes, like merging our businesses and Project B, as we've been calling it. All of that is stressful on top of, like you said, Josh, our daily roles of like being husbands and wives and moms and dads and brothers and sisters and so on. And I don't know if you guys feel like you have one specific thing that falls by the wayside in a season of stress for you. For me, and I know not everyone will be able to relate to this, but for me, what falls by the wayside is my appetite. And so I, in seasons of stress, have a really hard time getting food down. And I know people could be on the complete opposite end of the spectrum and be like, emotionally coping with food and overeating in those stressful seasons. I'm the opposite. When my stress is high, I have no appetite. It feels like I have food aversions to everything. I can't get anything down. I do pretty good with breakfast, and I do very well with dinner. Because usually Brant is home and cooks me the dinner, like, here's your plate, you need to eat. And I really, really struggle with lunch. And so what I wanted to come back to on the scheduling side of things is that I have started a few weeks ago to schedule out my lunch in my phone as like, You need to sit down and eat a meal, and you can't just take back to back to back to back calls and get stuck in these work holes just because you're not hungry, because that I could very well eat breakfast and not eat again until dinner and be perfectly fine. But I really started to notice that transparently come up in a few different ways. One, I started to get way leaner than I like. I don't like being as lean as I am right now. Mostly because I see my recovery suffer. I start to feel more like achy, more joint aches and pains. I know I'm more irritable. I know I'm not as energetic. I know I just like want to sit more. I don't want to be as active. And so I was starting to recognize how all of these other things, my ability to mom, my ability to be a wife, my ability to show up in business, have creative flow, have creative energy, show up for the gym, recover for the gym, all of that was being impacted by, I'm not really hungry. I'll just work through that meal. I'm not hungry anyway. I'll just book the back-to-back calls and meetings and Zooms and so on. And so now I have started to schedule my lunch, as silly as that sounds, as a non-negotiable. Like you have to do this. This is a non-negotiable. You need to feed yourself. And again, I know that might not be super relatable for everyone, but that is my thing that falls by the wayside for me in seasons of stress. And I can identify that I don't feel good when I skip that meal, and my calories are too low when I skip that meal, and I could have a huge dinner. I still can't recover from those missing 500 to 700 calories or whatever it is in that meal. And since doing that and since prioritizing that, as much as I am currently sick, I feel so much better besides the little cold that my toddler brought home from school. But I'm feeling so much better. My recovery is so much better. I'm not as irritable. I'm not as short tempered. I have more creative flow. And so I just kind of wanted to come back to, yes, like we hear time management and scheduling, but like schedule the shit that's really hard for you to do, whether that's the workout, whether that's the meal, whether that's texting your siblings. Schedule the hard shit, like schedule the stuff that you are having trouble with. And don't bail. Like if you scheduled a doctor's appointment, you wouldn't just no-show that. Don't bail on yourself. Schedule what you are having a hard time with right now and stick to that as much as you can. But when you do plan for it and you do schedule it, you're way more likely to do it.
That's probably one of the most relatable things that our listeners can get to, especially if you're in office and you have busy days and you stack meetings. It's like lunch does tend to fall by the wayside. And that's hoping you guys had breakfast prior to that. Then you get to work, blast through the day, had next to nothing to eat. And then a lot of times for those who are struggling with weight, maybe you did go nuts at dinner and, going way overboard in a lot of the highly palatable things. So that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I feel like what you just said is not off the rails. That's entirely relatable. For myself, it's when we have different projects going on, like especially at home. So we go from kids to work and then right now finishing an office in the basement. When we have a home project, and when we moved, it was painting and all these little things. I have such a hard time getting myself to work out because I'm like, this is an hour that could go towards painting, that could go towards framing, that could go towards whatever that project is. And that currently is my struggle right now. We have all these projects. It hasn't necessarily been the pull of doing the basement, but just with work, the way it's been the last few months, my training sessions have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter and further and farther in between. So, I've gone from 5 to 6 days a week, about an hour per workout, to being cool with scaling down to 4 days a week, 30 minutes per workout. That has gone down to 15 to 20 minutes per workout, like blasting through quad sets, blasting through extra supersets, very minimal rest, like a minute or less, just to cram through it, because we have a podcast, because we have a call, because we have a meeting, because we have these things, because we have to pick up the kid from school, my son. So I have now, like today was my day to finally sit down and say, I need to do this schedule thing. I have to open my calendar, write down all of these things in it, because this is no longer acceptable. Alessandra brought to my attention the other day, like, you haven't been doing cardio. You haven't been doing these things. When I talked about, I'm sleeping fantastic, but my HRV is shit. Like, it's typically in the 60s. It dropped down to low 40s. And I'm like, I'm not sick. Like, what is this? 2 days in a row of sprints, I'm back in the 60s, just waking up, doing 15 minutes of sprints, 5 hard sprints, and we're right back at it. So bringing that to my attention that, hey, I thought I had these things under control, just trying to handle them passively, but clearly I didn't. And that's why we talked about last week, we love the Aura Ring. It gives you that data. It gives you the metrics. If you're lucky enough to have someone at home to bring those things to highlight as well, hey, this is what you've been doing differently. Maybe this is a cause, and then you start implementing those. But it comes down to the scheduling and prioritizing it and understanding like, hey, something's off and there's a way to go about this. To pass you the mic back. Oh, you want to jump in with something?
I was gonna say, so that's what you were doing peacefully while the children were attacking me this morning?
What was I doing?
Your little scheduling task.
No, that was at 6 o'clock this morning. Nobody was
Cora's
awake
been
yet.
so funny, but like also she's
a lunatic.
She's going through like some sort of like developmental leap or whatever you want to call it, but like she like whatever, she'll put Kai in his place right now, and she just has a very strong feeling about everything. Attitude. Yeah.
Second kids. I'm telling
it's
you.
funny, but anywho, yeah, I was gonna just kind of touch on what you said a little bit more too, as far as nutrition. Like obviously being pregnant and going through all of this high stress of like business and just everything that we're doing. Yeah, like you get sucked into work. It's really easy to skip meals or just like feel like you just need to prioritize getting something done in the short time that we have available. But obviously I'm pregnant, so like I haven't necessarily been skipping meals per se, just snacking a lot more. And what I have found is on the days that I just do more snacking, by the time I get to dinner, I don't want a full balanced dinner. Like I'm almost just at that point where you're just like, nothing sounds good. I'm already full from the day. I'm in my third trimester. There's already limited room. But then I don't feel good because I'm not eating something balanced for dinner and I'm going to bed and I just feel crappy. I noticed my digestion was starting to suffer a little bit. My energy levels were suffering because we were like eating a lot of the same things. So like a lot of chicken varieties. Usually we eat more red meat and more fish and just like different sources of protein. And I feel my best when we do that, but we haven't been doing that because it's just been like, okay, what can we make that's quick and easy and just can get it down and like go back to work or tend to the kids. So we went to Whole Foods yesterday and just stocked up on some meat. We reactivated our Butcher Box subscription to get more red meat. And even just having one day of eating more balanced meals and less snacking, my energy levels were so much better yesterday. Like I actually wanted to go outside with the kids for an hour in the cold. And it wasn't like me suffering through it. So I just want to say like, even just doing something for the short term can make such a difference and really reminds you of how good you can feel. But to tie that into kind of the bigger picture here, something I posted recently on Instagram was about my gratitude journaling. And I've been doing gratitude journaling consistently for a while now. I wake up, I list 3-ish things I'm grateful for in the morning. It's like how I start my day. It takes maybe 3 to 5 minutes max. But I think I talked about this. Did I talk about this in the last episode? I don't remember.
I don't think so on the podcast.
Maybe not this aspect of it. But I read an article a week or two ago that talked about how you should really focus on like the things that are really hard to be grateful for, like the things that are bringing you stress or just really are negative things in your life. And how can you flip the script and find something to be grateful for from that thing? So even though I've been not feeling my best at this point in pregnancy, I was grateful for not feeling my best because it made me take a step back and figure out, okay, what can I do to feel better today? And I noticed it was the nutrition and the snacking that was lacking a little bit. So I fixed that, immediately feel better. That bled into me being way more active yesterday than I've been for the last week or two. So it can have this carryover effect into other areas of your life as well. But just having that assessment and having that perspective of, okay, this isn't working. This is something that's really annoying me or is really stressful or is really negative in my life. How can I make it better, or what can I focus on from that and kind of become a better person because of that?
So that's the I have to versus I get to shift. It's like I have to very simply cut the grass versus I get to because I have a home, because I have a yard. So taking something that's hard that you may not appreciate and making it something to be appreciative for, it's a quick reframe of that sentence. I have to go to work versus I get to go to work. So, I mean, from that perspective, just to kind of bounce it back to you, since being pregnant, what have you noticed are the main things that have been deprioritized purposely or non-purposefully? And then what are the things that you feel like are giving you the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to recreating your new routine?
When it comes to routine specifically,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, well, for a while, I think I got out of the early morning wake ups, like first trimester. Prior to pregnancy, I was running a lot. And even in the first trimester, I was running a lot, but I sort of shifted and was not doing it first thing most days. There were still some days sprinkled in. And I think it was just like more of like, oh, like I'm really tired. I need to sleep. I'm going to push it to later. And I had that flexibility to do that. But then it got to the point where it was like, obviously things started to happen with the businesses and just life was happening towards the end of my first trimester. And it got to the point where I was like, well, there really is no reason why I can't wake up early. I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. I'm feeling good. I kind of got out of that habit. So switching back to the early morning workouts is something that definitely has helped me feel my best, even though there was a period of time where it wasn't happening. And that's not to say you have to work out early or, you're better than everyone else if you work out first thing. I think there is some research, to show that there are benefits to working out early. But when it comes to your schedule and what works for you, don't think that that's like the secret sauce, like make it fit your life. But for me, I noticed that the rest of my day just tended to flow better. Physically, mentally, I had less aches and pains, just getting it done early. So that was something that I've continued, but it's kind of been ebbing and flowing a little bit. Other than that, I would say this has probably been my most consistent pregnancy as far as like keeping my habits and routines compared to the other two. And that's not to say the other two were bad or, not as good. I just feel more like my normal self this pregnancy so far. And now that we're getting into the third trimester is my least favorite personally. Like I'm pretty good during the first trimester. Second is everybody's favorite. And by the third, it's just like, you feel heavy, you're over it, like you're ready for the next phase. So I'm starting to get those feelings, but I have found that if I can keep that gratitude practice, keep my strength training high, cardio has dipped a little bit as expected at this point. Still doing 1 to 2 sessions per week. Those are the things that really are like my big rocks that I know will make me feel my best. And of course, balanced meals and not snacking as much. And then things that maybe I've struggled more with, I would say it's really been just the cardio stuff. And I think it's mostly been a mindset struggle because I was doing so much before. Like I was running 5 days a week, 25 miles per week. So to go from that to now just like, obviously not running, but also just very limited cardio and a higher focus on strength has been sort of like just the mindset shift that I had to make. So I would say that's really just the biggest struggle area for me currently.
It's just weird because you made me reactivate Peloton, so it should be this.
I'm still using it.
She's doing it. She's doing her Peloton.
I'm using it a couple times per week. It's just not as consistent as it was pre-pregnancy.
I would imagine the bike just feels more comfortable than running when you're this.
Oh
pregnant.
yeah.
Bouncing with that baby in your belly.
I will say there even are some days though where like when you're in a seated position, like as I bring my knees up, like sometimes my belly is like it kind of gets in the way. So I have to make sure the seat is like in the right position. But for the most part, it does feel pretty good. Like we have the cushioned seat, so that definitely helps your butt. But yeah, running it just doesn't feel like I don't have like symptoms like pubic symphysis or any like pelvic girdle pain or anything like that, but it just doesn't feel good. Like I can't explain it. It just, you feel heavy and slow and like, yeah, it's just added weight bouncing every time you take a step. So as much as I would love to just push through and like do it, it's just not worth it to me at this point.
I think something that ties into this topic really well is, and we've talked about this before in many different capacities, but lowering the barrier to entry. And so this is a great example of that. For instance, running feels uncomfortable right now. So instead of saying, F cardio. I'm not going to do any because I'm uncomfortable. Lowering the barrier to entry was hopping on the Peloton instead. It's still not super comfortable, but it's less uncomfortable than running was. You also mentioned before, like re-signing up for Butcher Box. That was something that lowered the barrier to entry so that getting in meat and protein was not as difficult. When I first started being like, I need to do the lunches, I need to have the lunches, I started ordering like meal prepped meals, because part of the barrier to entry for me was it's not just take time away from work to sit down and eat. It's I need to go cook that meal. So I either need to start meal prepping more, which also felt like a barrier to entry, or I need to lower the barrier to entry. And if there is food in my freezer that I can literally just grab from the freezer and throw in a pan to heat it up, or throw in the microwave to heat it up, that lowers the barrier to entry. And so we've mentioned a few different things now of, what we need to do to get things done. Josh, you brought up, shortening your workouts, being in and out in 20 minutes. That's better than nothing. And it lowers the barrier to entry. An hour of training feels really overwhelming in this season of life. So how did you lower the barrier to entry? You said, all right, I'm gonna make it 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And I just think lowering that barrier for yourself is a very helpful tool in being able to get through a less ideal season of life with your nutrition or your training. Because sometimes there's this gap, right, between intention and action. We have this intention of all the things that we want to get done and the behavior or the habit that we want to stick to. And then sometimes there's this disconnect between what we actually follow through with and what we actually do. And so if we can lower the barrier to entry, if we can plan ahead, if we can modify our environment, if we can eliminate the decision fatigue, that was a big part of like wanting the meal prepped stuff for me. Was it's like the classic thing, right? Brant comes home. He's like, what do you want for dinner tonight? And I'm like, please don't make me make another decision. Like, I don't care. I don't care what's for dinner. I don't care what you want to watch. I don't care what we order in. The cognitive overload and decision fatigue of like work all day, businesses all day, meetings all day, then kids all morning, kids all night. He comes home and he's like, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, I don't care. I literally don't care. So same thing with the lunches. Like if I have that meal prepped stuff done or meal prep stuff ordered and it's in the freezer, now I don't have that decision fatigue. Now I can help bridge that intention action gap.
So we have very similar lifestyles, obviously, but there are different components to how they're structured. We both work from home.
Yeah.
No health care. I was going to say healthcare.
Childcare.
No. Yeah, we have healthcare. No real child. We have our parents come for a couple hours, a few days a week.
They're real people.
I didn't have my coffee today. My second coffee, my third, fourth, fifth coffee. But you are work from home, nanny. I don't know if is she every day, and then Brant is at
Monday
work.
through Friday.
Okay, there you go. What are the first things that you find yourself cut out? And it, again, purposefully or, just you notice happen 3 weeks later when we get into seasons of life like this? What are the first things that typically hit the back burner for you?
Food, first and foremost. Like appetite is gone, and my desire to make that extra effort to cook when nothing sounds good, and I have no appetite and I have no hunger, that is for sure, like that just goes by the wayside. I'm literally drinking, if you're watching this, I'm drinking a protein shake on this podcast right now, lowering the barrier to entry. I didn't feel like I had time to sit, and granted I'm going to call myself out on this. I had a scheduled appointment during my scheduled lunch. So I came back, but Josh and Alessandra, you can attest to this. I was like, when I get home, I have to eat and then we can hop on the podcast. So lowering the barrier to entry here with the food. That's, I would say, the biggest one for me. Okay, go
ahead.
Yep.
I got one.
You got one for me?
Not for you. Well, one for you.
I was like, because we actually talked about this one this morning because we on FaceTime were talking about gratitude journal stuff. And I was like, that definitely fell by the wayside for me. Like, and honestly, this is not just fallen by the wayside in this season, because I've said this morning, I probably have not journaled since pre-kids. That was something I really enjoyed doing in the mornings. And then mornings just got hectic. You know, I got pregnant. I was throwing up every morning, and I was not doing a gratitude journal while I was barfing every morning. And then, you know, you have your baby and your mornings look completely different. And then you're pregnant again, and then postpartum again, and all of that. So all of that to say, I would say a lot of my journaling, gratitude, that has also probably fallen by the wayside. I would like to think that I've replaced some of those stress management and gratitude practices with therapy instead, because I did start therapy postpartum with my second baby. So that was kind of a replacement in some capacity. But yeah, I would say food and gratitude / journaling / mindset work. That's the stuff that certainly matters, but it's the things that get put on the back burner for me, because I feel like it's one of those things that I'm like, my time could be better spent elsewhere. And that sounds ridiculous when it talks about like feeding yourself and taking care of your mental health. It's like, no, there's not really actually much more important than that. So I'm not saying to do what I have done. I'm just sharing a honest moment with you.
So as far as things, maybe habits, strategies that you implement during these seasons, are there certain things that you do that you notice help with everything else, with work, with the kids, with the family time, with mental health? Are there certain things you look back and you say, these are my fallbacks? When I start to slide, I notice that these things help me a lot. And sometimes you just need that simple reminder that they're there.
Yeah. So not to keep coming back to the food component many times, but one, I have a husband who's really, really great at holding me accountable. Very similar to y'all, where like Alessandra being like, hey, you haven't done any cardio. Brant will be like, what did you eat today? He will text me like, did you have lunch today? What do you want to do for dinner tonight? Like, let's start planning that now. If it's a weekend, he'll just call me out like, you had a protein shake for lunch. That's not going to cut it. Like, what else are you going to eat? So having that accountability in my spouse has been really helpful. And I know maybe not everyone has that same experience, but having him help hold me accountable is really helpful. And I do notice, like I said before, when I do make that extra effort to have those calories and have those meals, it positively bleeds into other aspects of showing up as a mom, not being as winded, not being as tired, not being as irritable, showing up as a wife, not being as irritable, being more tolerant, and just being happier and healthier all around. So the accountability piece is helpful for sure. And I mean, shameless plug, I think from a client standpoint, that's what we hear all the time is like, I know what I should be doing, but I need the accountability, right? And we are the same way. Like, we are no different than that accountability helps us, even though we maybe know what we should be doing, but intention and action are two different things. And action is not as simple as intention.
Yeah. And I think part of that, like if you're listening to this, like Joelle said, and maybe you don't have a spouse that you feel is supportive, part of that is also you voicing and communicating what your needs are. So like the other day when I said like I had a harder day on Saturday, mental health wise, we were on the couch like most of the morning into the afternoon, and that just never flies with me. Like I never feel good after that. And then we went out and just like, I was not in a good place mentally. So when we got back home, I'm like thinking about like, why do I feel this way? Lack of movement, sitting on the couch all day, being stuck home, like all things I know do not affect me, or rather do affect me negatively. But also my blood work came back from my gestational diabetes test. They run a couple of other things too. And my red blood count was borderline low. So that to me is just reaffirming the fact that we need to eat more red meat and more fish and things like that. So as soon as I voiced that to Josh that night, I was like, we need to get butcher box. Like we need to do something. We need to start being more intentional with our dinners and with our food. The next day you ordered it. Like you took the initiative, you got it done. We went to Whole Foods together. You redid our butcher box. So it was all set. But like he would never know that if I just kept that to myself. So you have to voice your concerns and just communicate with your partner, with a friend, or with a coach if these things are feeling off. And more often than not, they're probably going to be willing to help you, if not just be there to listen.
Yeah, and to that point too, that's something that I haven't scheduled that part out yet, but I am going to actually implement our dinners on that calendar that I input. So we have, okay, this is a couple days of red meat, whether it's the steak or we do tacos or burgers, whatever it is, we're doing these days of fish. I want to lay those out. So one, for some of you that might feel way overboard and very extreme and regimented, and that's fine. Like it might not be for you, but for me, like I did get into a really nice period last year. I think when you're, or maybe it was right after Cora was born or during that pregnancy, but I was consistently making like a fresh, good meal, and she's been giving me shit the last couple of weeks that I kind of stopped doing that. But this kind of gives me the.
I'm like, baby 3 is getting the shaft. Cora got the
Listen,
high quality princess treatment.
Steak was not $35 a pound 2 years ago. It's been
so
nuts.
expensive.
It's crazy. But this way I can kind of look forward to it. So I know this meal's what we're having on this night. What are some things I can throw together that are going to be really good? And that can go back to making this an experience again. That's something to look forward every single day. Dinner has gotten bland with, bulk prepping and then having something reheated at the end of the day when we decide to stop working and the kids are running around and, okay, now I guess we're going to eat something. It gets very monotonous. So this kind of, it might be too much for some of you. For myself, I know that's something that I can look forward to. But again, giving more structure and then also having something be trackable. Like now we can say, okay, we did have red meat twice this week. We did have fish 2 or 3 times this week. A couple of days rotated in with chicken. Trying to keep the budget down as much as freaking possible. I understand, but that's where we're at. And that's where a lot of this stuff comes in handy and becomes really useful. But to circle back to the accountability component, again, it's not about, okay, I have all these things that I need to do and I need to go do this 60-day challenge. I'm going to do a 4-day water fast. I'm going to go train for 90 minutes, 6 days a week. If you're not even close to doing those things, like you're not going to maintain that beyond 2 days. Like these are things that are not going to be stuck to. The biggest changes you can make are going to seem like nothing. They're going to seem like such a waste of time in the moment. Oh, I have to read, what is reading 2 pages before bed going to do for me? Like what is walking 10 minutes twice a day going to do? That's not burning a ton of calories. How is that going to change anything? What is having a plant at every single meal going to do? You're establishing habits. You are changing your lifestyle for the long term with things that feel like nothing, but create dramatic transformations over time because you stuck to those. Rather than let's just say everything I mentioned before that was extreme was going to be a 50% improvement. Rather than a 50% improvement that lasts 2 days, you have a 1% improvement that you do every single day, 365 days a year. That's a much bigger chunk when you look back, and rather than go up and down, up and down, up and down for a year and get nowhere, look back 12 months later, nothing happened. The small incremental things that you can build on top of. So when we say little things, that's your starting point. You're just going to do that every day. A lot of times you're going to go above and beyond that, but you did it every single day. And it created this amazing change when you look back next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And rather than plummeting as you age, you continue to grow and climb and evolve and, maintain your prime for as long as possible. Now, I will say for myself, when I have a routine, I feel really, really good. I see my best changes. I feel my best mentally and physically. But those are typically with things that I am doing every single day. So a recent shift, just to kind of scale back overall stress on my body, I was doing cold plunges every single day. Now, mind you, these are 37 to 39 degree cold plunges. I'm not sitting in a 55 degree tub. It's cold. It's a big stressor on your body. That said, I wanted to scale back to 3 to 4 days per week. The problem with that is when I don't have this repetitive thing of this is when I do it every single day. I do X, Y, and Z. Then I go in the cold plunge and I come out and I make Kai's lunch and breakfast and yada, 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 yada. When it isn't just a part of my regimen, it falls off. So having this schedule as a new form of accountability, it's not just here's my daily routine that I do monotonously, mindlessly, without thinking about it. It just happens. When you start scattering them, they're not necessarily daily habits, and even your workouts. So this falls into the same category, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. It's not every single day at the same exact time. You schedule those in, you have that new form of accountability for yourself. And, I've done this a little bit before doing this shift to the calendar, where I'm like, okay, these are kind of the days. This is the way it's kind of going to look. Here's how I'm going to commit to this. It's not the same as actually writing it down, as putting it on paper, And there's actually science to back that up when you talk about your RAS, your reticular activating system. There's actually, you're like 4 times more likely to complete whatever goal, whatever task it is, if you physically write it down, not even on your computer. So there is power in that. There's power in manifestation. And then even at the root of all this, like the reason I am able to acknowledge my shortcomings in my routine, in, you know, my attributes as a dad, as a business owner, as whatever, is I've taken the last couple of years to really hone in on mindfulness. So for me, this is foundational work that I think everybody needs to be doing, whether it is your gratitude journal, you know, regular journaling, meditation, mindful breathing. The whole point is to bring you back to the present moment. And a lot of times we are stuck in these fear cycles, in these anxiety cycles, and in these depression cycles because of what's going on up in our heads. And I'm not doing this to say you're crazy. I'm doing this to acknowledge it starts up here. If we're in the present moment, we're not necessarily living up here. We're living with what's right in front of us. So we're not worrying about the past. We're not worrying about the future. We're just embracing this current moment. And that improves, you know, your ability to enjoy this moment, to feel joy, to be happy so much more. But to circle back to what we're discussing now, it also gives you the ability to acknowledge and to take accountability to things that you need to address. When I notice I'm short with my kids, when I notice, you know, I'm not nurturing our relationship, when I notice I'm falling behind in work, I can ask myself, what's happening? What changed? What do I need to do better? If I have a short fuse, okay, how can I be more patient? Why am I not patient? What am I not doing that allows me to be more patient? And owning it. This is my fault. This is on me. This is not on all these things, people doing things that are triggering these emotions and triggering these feelings. So the most powerful tool I've utilized in the last 5 years has been meditation for myself, and just being able to recenter, to recalibrate, to step back, apologize, and be better in the future in whatever it is, life, business, family, kids, in any regard. So for those of you who find yourselves stuck in this vicious cycle, you need to understand that to actually create change, you need to become a master of routine. And I had a post go out this morning talking about moderation, which I find a lot of us now use as an excuse to do certain things. When in actuality, moderation, in my opinion, is simply acknowledging we're not going to be perfect. Like, we do have these routines set, these regimens set. Moderation says it's going to look a little different from time to time, but I'm still committed to this thing, and I'm still going to come back to this thing. This is just, hey, it's not an all or nothing mindset. It's okay if I step back. It's okay if I fail today. I can start over tomorrow, and it's not that big of a deal. But again, big point being, come back to that thing that grounds you, that centers you, that routine that makes you better at all these other areas. So quick perspective on that.
So I had one of my pregnancy posts is like going viral. Shout out to Meg Squats, because she tagged me in her like remake of hers and said like my post was her inspiration. I think a lot of people came from there. But one of the overarching themes in the comments is obviously, you know, when you open up about your personal journey, people are going to naturally compare their journeys or just, you know, ask questions and yada yada. But one of the themes that has come up often in the comments is like, oh, I don't have time. How do you have time to work out? How do you have time to get 10K steps per day? I don't have time to do these things. And going back and forth with a couple of the people, I haven't been able to respond to every comment because it's like popping off. But going back and forth, it then becomes very clear that these people believe that you have to do things a very specific certain way, and it has to look 6 times per week for, you know, an hour and a half sessions, or, you know, they have this ideal of what they want to do. And if they can't do that, they're then just reverting to the statement, oh, I don't have time. And I think that's something we see obviously a lot as coaches over the years, is time is probably the biggest barrier for people. But I think it's actually just a misrepresentation of like what their expectations are when it comes to exercise. So when we're talking about routines and like these morning routines, and like even when I work out at 5:30 in the morning, I'll get people saying like, oh, I can't do that. I wish I could do that. I'd feel so much better. It's okay if you can't do that. What can you do? Can you do the 3 to 5 minute gratitude journal? Can you even just sit there and breathe deeply, meditate, be mindful for 1 minute before you go pick up your crying newborn? You know, how can you do one small thing to impact your current state of being. It doesn't have to be this huge thing or this very specific protocol. You have to make it fit the current season of life. This is something we say all the time, but I just wanted to touch on that side too, because I think people just do have this very unrealistic expectation of what they think it has to look like if it's worth doing to them.
Yeah, we talked about that maybe on one of the recent episodes about time being a barrier. And if you listen to the last episode, we talked about specifically like how much it would benefit your health to even just exercise once a week or to do 10 to 15 minutes. But we have this expectation of how we think it's supposed to look. And then that keeps us from doing it all together. So I love what you said about focusing on small, manageable changes that are going to be easy to sustain, whether that is, have one vegetable, add one vegetable to one meal, like add one vegetable to dinner instead of saying, I'm going to overhaul my entire diet. Start with just adding a vegetable to dinner. And that, goes back to Josh's thing about like do 2 pages of a book, like make it so stupid easy that you're not overhauling your whole life. It doesn't have to look like that. So I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind is focusing on those small, manageable changes. The other thing that I would mention is it is a lot easier to change your environment than it is to change a habit. And so I bring that up because when we are in the right environment, that helps to support the behavior or the habit that we do want to change. Maybe it's keeping, ice cream out of the house or, whatever makes that environment easier for you. Alessandra, for us, it might be picking out, our gym clothes for the 5 a.m. workout the next day because it's just going to lower the barrier in the morning. So something that you could change about your environment. What do you do when you walk into your garage gym? You turn on your vibey lights, you put on your music and you put on the heater and you put on the heater, and that environment is going to change the way that you show up to your workout. So I just think that's like just an underrated pro tip of it's easier to change your environment than to just change a habit. So what can you change about your current environment to make things easier for your future self?
Now, I know we're coming up against the clock, but I'm going to throw a kind of loaded question at you guys because you are the social media queens. You're very good at nurturing your audiences. You're very engaged. They're very engaged. A big problem for a lot of people is getting lost in social. And a lot of times you have a minute, you're scrolling, and it turns into 15 minutes, turns into 20 minutes. And aside from the time that you're losing there specifically, you also tend to lose motivation for other things. You just become more physically and mentally drained after you go through this exhausting journey of scrolling through social media. So have you guys gone through that struggle? And obviously you continue to show up. So if you have, how do you balance that? How do you still show up for your audiences? Do you show up, make the post, have the conversations while trying to avoid that negative pull? And just think about this from a micro level. How is someone else pulling themselves out of that similar rut?
Yeah, I think we've all been there. I don't think anybody who has been on social media can say that they never have gotten pulled into the doom scroll. I think it's definitely, at least for me, it might be slightly different because like this, I view it as my job. Like I literally view social media as work, whether people realize that or not, but like that is a big part of what we do. So something that I've done over the years is I really am intentional about, number one, who I follow. I'm very selective, and before I just click that follow button, I like make sure this is somebody I really want on my feed. So that's number one. But number two, I try to focus on my output more than my input. So if I'm going on social media, I'm going on there to post a story, to engage with one of our business pages, to respond to DMs, to respond to comments, my output, rather than what can I get from this right now. So like that's always something I try to come back to, and it's easier when I'm following less people because there's just less people showing up on my timeline, right? Like it's less temptation to want to see what all of these people are doing today when I'm only following like 200 people. So those are like my top 2 tips, but I'm not perfect. And there's definitely days where I do get sucked in, especially on TikTok. Like I'm trying to be better about posting on TikTok, both on my personal one and our business. We have a podcast one now. So I'm like constantly trying to just, it's almost like research, like scrolling, yes, but also seeing what like the vibe is there and what works for people. So I do get sucked in that sense, but I think it really comes back around to monitoring who you follow and even just giving yourself like schedule social media doom scrolling time in your day. Like you talk about scheduling things, schedule a 20-minute chunk if it's something you're really like having a hard time breaking, that's your intentional time to scroll. Maybe it's at the end of the day, maybe it's after you eat your lunch. Having that time to scroll opens it up and almost makes it like I'm allowed to do it right now. And then like later you're maybe not as tempted because you've got it out of your system. I don't know if that's one take that I think that might be helpful, but if you're constantly opening and scrolling and wasting time and energy on it, you kind of have to clean out what your social media looks like, or even detox altogether, like take a break.
I have limits set on my phone. Like you could do it directly on Instagram. I set 10-minute scroll limit. So maybe it's 5 minutes. I don't remember. It's either 5 or 10 minutes. And if I just like go on to post, what happens to me, Alessandra, I'll go on to post, answer a few DMs, post a story, and then I get sucked into the doom scroll. And now I have that little thing that pops up from Instagram that says, you've been scrolling for 5 minutes straight, or you've been scrolling for 10 minutes straight. Is it time to take a break? And I'm like, oh thank
that's cool.
you.
I didn't even know it did
you
that.
Don't, yeah. And it's not even like another app. I'm pretty positive it's just right on Instagram. And I also set a time limit for the day, whether, I think you could set like a half an hour or an hour, 2 hours. And so if I hit like the 1 hour mark, Instagram will tell me like, you have spent 1 hour on this app already today. Like, FYI, do you want to close the app or like keep scrolling? And you have to then choose like,
of course, they're not going to tell you to like, they're not going to shut it down. They want you to stay on it.
Right. It's not going to just close the app for you, but I can't tell you how often I get sucked in that scroll. And it's like, you've been scrolling for 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, thank you. Putting that down and getting back to work now. Like ADD got sucked in. So I think setting those limits too on social media can be really, really helpful.
That's a huge plus if people aren't using that tool for sure. One thing I notice is when I'm eating, and this is something that sometimes I'll be like, I just want to. Sometimes like, no, I know I should. And sometimes like, fuck it, I really don't want to watch this update on the Patriots, or, I got 10 minutes. When else am I going to do this? When I do that during my meals, I am more likely to be sucked in throughout the day. If I keep myself off my phone for my meals, and if I'm just looking out the window, we've got a nice view right now of the pond because we got no leaves on the trees. I'll just chill and like let my thoughts matriculate. I'm actually like not thinking about business, but I'll come up with a couple ideas, and that's when I'll usually pick my phone back up and text you guys. Or I just decompress, and when I do get back to work, I feel better. I am entering that flow state faster. So whether you're setting the limits, whether you're just purposefully leaving your phone upside down while you're eating, I know that's a huge trigger for a lot of people, myself included. So that might be another strategy you guys want to implement. But to kind of come back to the main theme of today, guys, you need to become a master of your routine. And it's not necessarily that it has to be this big overhauling thing. In fact, we recommend the exact opposite. It should be maybe 3, maybe 5 tiny things that you can do every single day that become non-negotiables, recognizing that moderation is actually accepting the days that you do fall off track, because even as small as some of these are, you're going to have bad days. You are human. You're not perfect. Moderation is understanding that it's okay that happens and moving forward the next day, starting fresh, giving yourself that clean slate. But for those of you who may be in a rut, busy season, holiday season coming up, things are tough, let this be your reminder to just ground yourself, recenter yourself, and remind yourself what those simple things are that allow you to thrive in all those different areas of your life. If it's the gratitude journal, if it's the cold shower in the morning, if it's fine-tuning something with your nutrition, if it's taking that morning walk, that evening walk with the family, whatever it is, there is literally nothing too small. If it makes you feel a little bit better and you can do it consistently, it will have a massive impact on your life.
And remember too, I just want to leave you with this today, with hopefully the other thought that we aren't perfect and that we do also struggle. you're not ever failing unless you decide to not start again. So if you've been off for weeks and you just feel like you're in this hole and you can't climb out of it, it's never too late to just pick back up and start with something small. And I just wanted to remind you of that. Like, you have not failed if you choose to start again and choose to reprioritize the things that matter to you.
I also want to leave you with one final thing. This is a conversation that I was just recently having with a client about the ability for grit and grace to coexist, because I think a lot of this conversation that we're having about like lowering the barrier to entry and having non-negotiables and not giving up entirely and not having the all or nothing mentality, a lot of that comes down to grit versus grace. And it's a common question that I get in the coaching space. It's a common question I get on Instagram, especially as it relates to like the do it tired mantra of like, how do I know when to push and be gritty versus when to cut it back, give myself grace? And I think what people don't necessarily realize is that grit and grace can coexist within the same moment, within the same decision, within the same habit, within the same behavior. And so the example I like to give is, maybe grit is waking up and doing it tired, and you woke up early and you go out to that garage gym and you start getting your workout in, and then bam, the baby wakes up. You end up needing to cut your workout short and need to go nurse the baby or, tend to the baby, whatever else. And that grace has to take over. And so in that moment, grit was, I got up to get it done early. Baby woke up. Mom duty is happening. Mom life is calling. And so I'm going to give myself some grace for the fact that I'm going to need to cut this workout a little bit short. I pushed through it with grit. I had to cut it short. I'm going to give myself that grace so I could go be a mom to my kid now. So I think that's just a helpful reminder for people that a lot of what Josh and Alessandra and I are talking about, even in this call, and I'm sure you'll hear it, undertones of it in lots of other things, is that grit and that grace can coexist. You can be gritty and push through and also give yourself grace when something doesn't go as planned, or, be gritty, Josh, and push through that 20-minute workout. Even though you maybe wish it was a 60-minute workout, you're going to give yourself that grace and know that the 20 minutes was enough. And Alessandra, you are not running anymore because it feels really uncomfortable, but you're going to do that grittiness of getting through a uncomfortable Peloton workout instead, but giving yourself the grace of, I'm glad I'm doing the cardio, even though it's not running. So I just want to point out that grit and grace can coexist in the same situation, in the same habit, in the same behavior, and they should and they can coexist. It doesn't have to be all grit or all grace all the time.
Love that. And if you guys are struggling with where to get started, we have so many different levels at Levolution Coaching. We have freebies where you can literally go on our site. It's also linked in the show notes, and just download a guide as far as getting started. Find the one that kind of best suits you, jump in, and you're going to be walked through the entire L5 method as far as training, nutrition, mindset, movement, habits, and what to apply. We've also got the app, more hands-off approach from our side, but you do get more guidance on specific programs. You get access to everything in that app. You're not limited to one specific program. And obviously our premium option is one-on-one health coaching, where you work with an expert on your specific protocols, what is going to give you the highest ROI, and learn how to maintain this stuff for life. Nothing we do is a short-term challenge. These are all lifestyle changes that have the massive impacts over that longer time. And lastly, guys, our 3-episode rule. If you have listened beyond 3 episodes, you've probably gotten some value, and we would greatly appreciate if you just drop us a quick 5-star review. It does help us expand the audience, and the goal here is, if it helped you, it's probably going to help someone else. So pay it forward, allow this audience to grow, help it grow, nurture this community, and let this fall into the lap of someone else who could really use it. What are you looking at?
I just want to say, should we take a poll of how many people will be pissed that you complained about paying for Peloton and they felt bad for me?
Oh.
What?
I saw Alessandra
I made a
smirking
little
at the end, and I'm like,
Where did that come from?
Because I'm thinking about our last episode, how people, I don't even remember what it was about.
Oh,
People,
you got left out because daddy can't be with his son for sports.
You said something a few minutes ago, Josh. You said something like my son. And I was like, oh, people are going to come at him because he didn't say our son.
Believe it or not, guys, we are two people. And even though our Zoom account is Alessandra and Josh Skutnik, it does come up as a singular human, kind of. We are two people. Believe it or not.
He's not bullying me in real life. It's fine.
No. Anyway, we love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you in the next one. Where can they find you guys?
At Alessandra Skutnik.
At Joelle Samantha.
Everything
At Josh
else.
Scott. What about me?
Oh, sorry.
I'm a different person. I'm a whole different person.
See?
She forgot.
Back at you.
10 seconds and she already forgot. I'm a Josh
Everything
Skutnik.
else you need is
They
linked
can't
in the
you.
show notes.
Catch you later, guys, hopefully.